بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to tonight's show called Ahlulbayt Live, a weekly show where we have lively discussion and discourse about religious and social affairs. I'm your host once again, Neil Nasser, and it's my honor to be joined by my great friend and a true servant of the Ahlulbayt, Sayyid Abbas Faroshi.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for having me, Neil, and it's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you so much, Sayyid. Now, Sayyid has been a student for the Hawza at the Hawza for over 6 years now. And alhamdulillah, he's focusing on developing the youth in the South London community. Sayyid is also a human rights lawyer and specializes in homelessness and refugees, if that's correct. And on top of that, a busy schedule, he also hosts a monthly reflections podcast on YouTube. Sayyidina, thank you so much for having us. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the live show.
Alaikum salam. It's a genuine pleasure to spend any time with you, Neil.
Mr. Fashuri, thank you so much for being with us today. Alhamdulillah. I'm sorry for saying your name incorrectly. I have this mental block on your name for some reason. So today our topic, dear viewers, is about our youth. Okay, we're going to talk about the journey to the truth. We'll be exploring the various challenges faced by our Muslim youth and how we can best guide the next generation. I think it's a really important topic, say.
Yeah, and it will affect a lot of people who are watching as well, wherever they are, whether in the West or the East of the world. The youth and the identity issues that we face need to be solved before any of the other problems of Islam can be appreciated or the issues can be solved. So we have to have this discussion. I'm glad that we're having it.
Thank you for being a part of it, dear Said. I feel it's fitting for us to start our discussion today, if we don't mind, starting off with your story. You're growing up in South London. You know, different experiences growing up in that particular area of London. And how did these experiences, Sayyid, lead you to your present day? How did your past affect your present and possibly your future?
It's a very good question, and we should always begin with the past to know where we situate our lives and our experiences. Because let's say I've got a lifestyle, you've got a lifestyle, we need to zoom out and see how did we get here? You know? So if I reflect on that question of our past and how we got here, you know, I'm from London, I'm from the West, this is where I was born, this is my home. And a lot of people, young people, have this issue of an identity crisis where they are looking for that feeling of home and they don't find it in the conventional answers. They look, for example, in the place that you grew up, you know, London or Birmingham or Manchester or Canada or US or wherever. And you think, you know what, I've lived here and I was born here, but I'm not really the same as those who are around me. My religion is something special to me and the sacred is not really appreciated in my community. And so I don't have that feeling of home being around those who are my school friends or those you know, I play football with or whatever. I don't have the same feeling. Then I go to the East. I go to where my parents are from. I go to, for example, I don't know, I go to Karachi, Pakistan, or Hyderabad, or India, or whatever. Iraq, Iran. And I'm not from there either. Like, I'm not from there.
Yes.
They have their own life, they've got those values. And a certain set of experiences which they share, which I have left, I've departed from. Either I migrated or my family migrated. So I'm not from there, I'm not from here either. So then I come back to the West. And not only am I stuck in between two places, I'm stuck between two generations, because I'm not the previous generation either, with the values they had when they came. And neither am I that group who are going to only ever know life in the West. I have something in between. Now, if someone's listening thinking that sounds familiar to my experience, what you've gone through is a very popular problem, the issue of identity.
Yes.
Now, how I fit into that issue is a point of reflection, if I can expand on this a little bit.
Please.
I'm from London, from South London. Okay. How have I grown up? I've grown up in a community of an Indo-Pakistani community where migration began sometime in the 1950s but peaked in the 60s with economic migration of people coming from India and Pakistan to the West. Okay, many ulama came at that time as well, who came from the Hawza of Najaf, and they settled in areas like the UK and like America and like Canada. You then had certain ulama like Mullah Zishan Haidar Jawadi and a few others, prominent scholars who came to build this community. But most who came to build their lives. You had some refugees and migrants who came claiming asylum, but they were just people trying to build their lives. Okay. And they were listening to videos of Allama Rashid Turabi and these ulama to learn. Then you've got the Iraqis, same thing at the same time. Iraqi migration peaks from the 60s and 70s during the time of Saddam, where you have people fleeing to come to a safe place.
Yes.
And then you have ulama who came like Sayyid Mahdi al-Hakim and Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum, and they established certain centers here in London in the West, for example. And they're sharing the same videos of Sheikh Ahmed Wa'ali like we are sharing Rashid Turabi, same thing. At the same time, you have Khoja migration at the same time, where the Khojas who migrated from India, Pakistan to East Africa in the late 19th century, now they're facing persecution in East Africa and they've got to go somewhere. So in between 72 and 73, so many Khojas settled in the West as well. They're coming at the same time. Okay, and Mullah Asghar comes and establishes the World Federation in 1976. 79 is the revolution of Iran. So now you have Iranians coming in mass numbers and people from Afghanistan and Lebanon coming as well. And in general, the feeling of religiosity increases in the West. So when I grew up with all of this happening around me, I'm a young person, this multicultural tapestry is woven by so many different fabrics of different communities that I'm looking and drawing my own identity with those colors. And I get to choose what I want to be based on those resources. That's my upbringing. And I think most people have been in areas where they have that same richness in their history.
Alhamdulillah. I guess that, like you say, tapestry helped to formulate your landscape right now. Now we have an understanding that, you know, within this migration, this settlement, not everybody has having the same opportunities. Not everybody is, you know, having that same support network around us. Can we compare the upbringings and maybe draw some conclusions?
It's a good point, because when I'm speaking to someone else, like perhaps yourself or whoever else, we might have different stories of how we got here.
Yeah.
But our anecdotes will have some shared features.
Of course.
And some of those things are wanting haqq, for example.
Yeah.
Aspects of our fitrah, our innate nature, which are universal across the board. Wanting to be close to goodness, staying away from harm, values like family, things like searching for the sacred among a life of materialism. All people share those kind of general themes. Now, how they manifest depends again on your upbringing, your parents, your community, your language, your culture, and your history.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned, in the West, we have access to so many different narratives converging to form this thing called Western Shi'i identity.
Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, my path to the truth, my path to Ahlulbayt, I was born in a mixed marriage. My mother's English, my father is Khoja, and grew up pretty much, you know, in a different environment. So mother and father divorced at an early age and stayed with mother, who predominantly was English, and then not having any access to any religiosity, literally, but grew up in a very diverse playing field. Grew up with Rastas and, you know, street people, you know, literally lived a different kind of lifestyle. Fell into hip-hop music, became a DJ, and my story continues. And then, you know, 10, 15 years ago, followed the path, literally came onto the path of the deen. And that journey was a different journey to everyone else, you know, that kind of aspect of it. But I feel, again, like you were saying, that tapestry, that richness of diversity that played a part within my life had given me a good outlay into what I want to become in the future. So how I can interact with different people from different races, different backgrounds, and have a fuller understanding of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when I'm walking on this path of truth, this path of haqq, it helps me to understand that and implement it even further. So we understand, no matter these avenues, I'm going to call them avenues that we travel down, we can all find these different ways to the haqq, to the truth. We can all find that, right? In the work that you do, Sayyid Abbas, tell us, what is the current climate of the Muslim youth growing up in the West? How is it right now?
I should mention first what I do to contextualize the kind of people I'm interacting with.
Please.
My background is split between, I guess, two environments. One is that of academia and Hawza and education of Islam, and also in general about legal and political study and the LSE, where I'm affiliated with at the moment. But the other half is my practice, my work as a human rights lawyer. So I'm working with homeless people, refugee communities in Greece and in Calais, in France, in Lebanon, all around the world, and interacting with them. So when I come and interact with people, I get people who ask me questions about Islamic law because I guess I'm an accessible person you can speak with, and I want to know the ruling on this issue, for example. But then I get people who are going through genuine suffering in their lives, like they are hurting and they're in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean people who are living life of destitution and homelessness. That's where I got my training. I mean people in our community, like your children, yourselves.
Yep.
People are in a lot of pain.
Yep.
And in the questions that you get and reflections people share, it is looking for haqq and spirituality and truth in an environment where you just won't find it or stumble across it naturally.
No.
Because all around you there is materialism. There are forces which have no need for the sacred. The whole system themselves are based on secularism. So unless you want truth and you're initiated and you are committed, you can fall into one habit, and the habit can take you so far away from the truth that you question whether there's any way back. But there's good news, and the good news is that the path of Ahlulbayt and the Quran are so dynamic that wherever you begin, they have in them the resources to bring you towards Allah Azza wa Jal. So a person can be literally at their lowest possible point in their life, or they can be embedded in the sins which they think no one has done except me, or no one has actually knows the extent of the level I have stooped to. But whatever mentality you have, the moment you cling on to the clothing of Ahlul Bayt, they pull you back towards Allah Azza wa Jal. The moment you find one verse of Quran that just hits you, one verse you saw on Instagram or a scholar mentioned, it's enough. It has in it all of the resources you need to go back. So wherever your starting position is, this is the only race where you can catch up. You can catch up to the nearest possible point with God from wherever you start. You can be Hur, you can be Habib. So all young people who come to me, this idea that there's always a way back and always hope for you is the common theme that we always come back to in different ways. We come back to this place. There's always a way back to Allah Azza wa Jal.
Alhamdulillah, you take that one step, that first step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He will take 10 steps towards you. I felt it myself within my life, the reformation and the changes that I made. So the youth out there really do not despair. And the reason we have such a blessed friend of ours right now, because he's a young person in our community who is doing some incredible things with his life. He's giving lectures. He's a scholar in training, inshallah, 6 years at the Hawza. And just this Muharram past, we saw him on members of many different centers up and down the country. So inshallah. Sayyidina, in your experience, is there much support from the centers that you visit and the communities that you engage with? Do they seek the opinion of the young people that are out there?
Much support like that varies based on what that means, for different people. Sometimes, yes, when you give responsibility to the youth to run events or to show what they're made of, or to take responsibility, which is the way of the Sunnah as well, the Holy Prophet. When he gives Hudayfa bin Yaman the banner, people say this is a very young person. Why are you giving him so much responsibility? The Prophet's answer is, this is haqq, this is the truth. You follow wherever you find it. Some say that Imam Ali alayhi salam was too young to be in certain roles, but Ali ma'al haqq, wal haqq ma'ali. Ali is with the truth. And the truth follows Ali to know that it's the truth.
I feel like I want to do a Nara Haydari. Subhanallah, subhanallah.
There are so many examples which should get Nara Haydari, which are like this, where young people are given, stay there, shabab ahl jannah. They are the masters of the youth of paradise. Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So this example shows us that being a young person and a youth is a maqam of responsibility. We are told in narrations, when you're different ages, you have different roles to do. And the youth are given many responsibilities. Let's look at this one example for your question, right?
Please.
Hadith. The heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. Wherever you plant will grow. Every community should look at their youth as an investment for themselves. That maybe they will not live to experience the fruits that come from this tree, but they'll have planted the seeds. And those same trees will be shade for their own graves when they're gone. So I was in Najaf not too long ago at the Hawza visiting, and I went to a school there, Bab al-Ilm school. And they said, we've got loads of children and they want to recite things for you, come and listen to them. So I come, and they know Nahj al-Balagha, they know du'as, they know so many verses of Quran just like that with perfect makhraj. And I spoke to them after and I said to them, and I'll say this to you as well now in answer to your question, if young people are the foundations of this ummah, then however strong they are, that's as strong as we're going to be. And however solid they are in their ideology and in their wealth and in their, in their welfare, that's how tall we can be as a qawm. The moment they start crumbling, we go sideways.
True.
And with any building, when you make the foundations, if the foundations are strong enough, you can choose any building to plant there. It can be a hospital, it can be a legal office, it can be a chicken shop, I don't know. It can be a university, it can be a hawza, it can be a madrasa. But if the foundations are strong, you have that choice. When the foundations are weak, you're limited in what you can build on that ground. So if our community don't take our youth seriously, we're stunting our own growth. And everyone who you see around you who's successful, they came from tarbiyah. Why are we not doing tarbiyah for our young people, for example? So there are some good projects, but there needs to be more.
Yeah, I agree. There needs to be more. And sometimes I feel being involved in some centres, it can be a bit of a tick box exercise. So we see sometimes in our centres that they engage the youth, they engage maybe people to the younger people to do some projects or maybe perform a play or have a little section where they speak. But it feels to me like this tick box exercise. We need to be taken more seriously. The youth need to be taken more seriously. That way people can grow and flourish, just as you had, Sayyidina. You've flourished yourself and you've stood up against some of the things that are going on in and around the areas that you live, because, I grew up in that particular area as well. And it's tough. It's very difficult to be in that area and to stand out and be on that path of haqq.
On that point, Neil, if I can jump in.
Please.
When it comes to young people, their issues are not things like they need to be coming to the mosque and they need to be reading Quran more. Their issues are they're facing drug addiction, they are facing relationships, they are not able to pray salah, they don't know why they believe in God, they don't know how to speak with adab and akhlaq to those around them. But more importantly, none of their questions are being answered and religion is not useful for them. That's the fact of it.
Yeah.
Most parents don't actually know their children. They don't actually know their children. There's a theory in social sciences of the coat theory, where a child puts on a coat to go to school, they put on a coat to come home, they put on a coat to go to the mosque, and they don't show their actual identity to any of them. They're simply playing a game.
Yeah.
And I think most young people are used to playing this so much they feel like no one actually knows my issues. So the issues with youth is not giving them a quota in a community that they are now being represented. They need to be listened to. What is actually the problem? What is your relationship with God like? Why are you in pain? Why is it hard for you to have that love for Ahlulbayt and express it? Why aren't you finding our culture appropriate for your love? These are the questions we should be asking.
Yeah.
And when they speak, we should listen.
Yeah.
And what we do is based on their answers, not based on what we want them to be, based on what they need Islam to serve them as.
Definitely. Some of the work that I do with as a mentor and a coach, and working with young people and young offenders to understand some of the pressures that our youth have to go through on a daily basis. I was speaking to a young person probably about a good couple of years ago now, pre-COVID, and there was this thing going on in this particular area. It was like postcode wars. So he could not go to his school without taking 3 buses.
Yeah.
There was one direct bus.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry to cut in saying one direct bus, but he had to take 3 buses to go all the way around just to get to his school. For the fear that if he gets caught by a certain gang member who knows that he's from this postcode, that he will either get stabbed, he will get beaten up or set upon. Now, this is the sad reality that our youth, this is a youth from our community, our own community. Now, we know this is going on in our society, but do our leaders know what's going on in our society? So having said that, and we touched upon it, how can our communities empower young people more? Let's start listening to them, but what kind of forums need to take place?
On the problem, to expound it further, I know youth who are being stabbed. I know youth, Shi'i, our community, who've been in prison, who've come out. I know people who are homeless, actively, currently, from our qawm, and others who have been homeless. Like, this is not just words, these are real people who are not being served by our community. Now, on what needs to be done, because the problems are so varied, we could list the problems and on of the issues people are going through and give value to all of their suffering. One of the things is access to knowledge. Because if I mention Quran and Ahlulbayt as being part of the cure of this issue, they need to be accessed in the right way, and the narrations need to be pointed out with the right interpretations. And that's the role of ulama. And that's why when scholars take, and there are so many ulama taking the effort to be accessible to young people, we need to promote that, because that's so much more useful to them than a 1-hour lecture.
Yes.
The lecture is for the general community, the masses. It needs to be said in a certain way for the qawm as a unit to appreciate it. But that young person has very specific issues they need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So off the minbar, Instagram live, podcasts, events, Q&As, going out for a coffee with the scholars that I've seen, going in nature, hiking with the ulama. We are told by recommendations, one of the issues of staying away from fahshat is to spend time with the ulama. It's literally there. And all this knowledge needs to exist. Ilm is part of amal. There needs to be action with this knowledge. So being close to scholars and scholarly works, producing literature which is genuinely accessible for people, not just thick volumes they're not going to read in a language which they don't understand.
No.
I'm talking about courses,
Yeah.
series. I know people who listen to lecture series while playing FIFA. Ilm has changed how it's consumed now.
Yes.
And we need to produce knowledge based on that way of consumption. So these are all clever techniques in knowledge transfer. There's nothing to do with changing our religion or trying to seek a modernism which isn't needed.
No.
It's just changing our method of communication to speak to a target audience which is bleeding.
Yeah. I mean, we were discussing earlier the things like Reels and TikTok, those 30-second clips sometimes that can be so inspiring. And we were listening to a few ourselves that really, we're going to be playing around in our heads for some time.
Yeah.
because they're so inspiring. So maybe we could think outside of the box, something that we talk about, that kind of, that reformation of the pulpit, that reformation of how we're delivering it and engaging with our youth, to engage with our youth. I think also, from my personal opinion as well, there needs to be some practical solutions that need to take place. Speaking to the ulama, the scholars, is one thing, Sayyidina, but also we need to enrich our people in our communities, need to enrich our youth by maybe reaching out to them, maybe taking them under their wing, maybe becoming mentors themselves. So maybe one of our centers or our communities could roll out a mentoring scheme. Yeah. So train people to be mentors to our youth. Have you ever seen anything like that on your travels or heard of anything like that?
Yeah, mentoring is a very good way to start. When you assign someone a mentor, someone who, like I have had mentors in the past and still do, someone who understands your experience, when they advise you, like on your career or your spirituality or your accountability, they know you, they know what you've been through. So their advice can be very pointed for what you're going through right now. It's not abstract, it's not far away, it's imminent, like all of Islam should be. It should be as close to us as our jugular vein. That Lord never went away from us.
Yes.
Alongside that, I've seen positive work in volunteering, where young people start taking responsibility for their community, whether it's cleaning up the streets or beach cleans, or serving homeless people, or going to refugee camps, or giving out roses on a wiladat of the Holy Prophet, or any of these projects. When you volunteer and serve others, going to care homes in the pandemic, these are such beautiful activities to do. Okay. Alongside that, I have seen retreats, which are great. Camps, going into nature. Do you know how much of our recommendation in Islam is linked to nature? Praying under the skies, praying on earth, on actual turab, making sure that you are visiting and traveling in the land. This is in the sunnah as well.
Yes.
So being close to nature, going on hikes, camping, i'tikaf as well, these types of practices. So we've got volunteering, we've got mentoring, we have ilm as well. Like there's still a role in knowledge as well. It just changes form.
Yes.
Sending people to the Hawza.
Wow.
In Qum and Najaf and Mashhad and Karbala and those who come back, we have great ulama who've done great work and are actually from these communities. So when they come back, and we should be encouraging more to go to the Hawza, because the Hawza contains in it so many of the resources we need, especially in knowledge of the seerah. And they come back and then they know how this ilm applies. That hadith I mentioned about the Imam alayhi salam and the heart of the youth being uncultivated piece of land. If you're told that by someone who doesn't know the youth, they don't know what that means. But if someone who's come from Qum or Najaf or one of the Hawza or any of the institutions in the West, for example, and knows the language with which to use our tradition, they can touch the heart of that person. So mentoring, volunteering, going into nature, spending quality time is another important thing. Just meeting with one another. The Ashab alayhi salam were good friends. They would trade together, do business together. They'd visit each other's houses. They wouldn't just be following Imam alayhi salam. They'd spend time with each other as well. That's what we need, because we have an imam as well right now who expects us to have that social walaya amongst one another. And how can I have walaya with you if I see you once a year in a majlis? I'm not going to have that with you. So spending quality time, friendship, taking responsibility in the family, these types of things are all part of it. And together they become tarbiyah. Tarbiyah is not alone. Tarbiyah is an entire process, like I mentioned.
And I guess that builds a bit of unity and a bit more understanding between the difference between the age gap and sometimes the kind of unreachable state some scholars will feel to a young person. They feel like there's a disconnect between the two. So kind of bringing it back down to that level. Now, we've talked a lot about the responsibility of the leaders and the scholars in the community. Let's just turn the focus now. What's the responsibility of the Muslim youth themselves now to enhance their journey towards that truth?
More than any alim or scholar, the example we have is the Holy Prophet, who says, I've not been sent except to make your akhlaq perfect. Every young person should be thinking, how is my akhlaq? And akhlaq is not manners, akhlaq is ethics. And our ulama say it has 4 levels. The top level is my relationship with God. You know, how honest and authentic is that relationship? How often do I speak to Allah Azza wa Jal? Is the language I'm using honest to who I am? You know, these du'as I'm employing and the salat I'm praying, am I using them as part of my continuous dialogue with Allah Azza wa Jal? The second level of that akhlaq is your relationship with yourself. So now it's when I look in the mirror, Do I see exactly who I am and what I have been through and what I have become? Do I see the different components which have come together to make me me? Like, Man عرف نفسه فقد عرف ربه. If you know yourself, you know your Lord. But do I know myself in order to get to stage 2 of knowing my Lord? Okay. Stage 3 of akhlaq is your relationship with other people, your family, your friends, your spouse, your children, your neighbors, students and ulama and people who you meet in the streets and strangers and poor people and the poverty and the mustad'afin, those who are oppressed. Am I doing anything for this group? And the final level of akhlaq is your relationship with nature, with the planet, with the actual environment you've been born in and which you're going to return straight back to.
Yeah.
So a young person should ask myself, in these 4 levels of akhlaq, am I taking responsibility in my conversation with God, in my self-knowledge, in my social relationships, and in my connection with this planet that I am from? And in each of them, there are different solutions. And luckily, this religion is so comprehensive and complete. And our Aimma have such care for us, and the Quran is so comprehensive. All of these are covered by the same resources of Ahlulbayt. And when we have to go outside, they advise us how to go outside and how to come back into the fold with knowledge from different places. So my advice is look at those 4 things, see what's lacking, and then seek resources for those issues.
SubhanAllah, beautifully put. Thank you so much. Do you feel that there is enough young role models in our communities for our youth to look up to, like yourself?
I think there are enough who are better than myself. There are loads.
Allah.
You just have to open your eyes. I mean, the young people already know who inspire them towards deen. They know what speakers, or they know not just speakers. You know, sometimes you're with someone and your whole mood becomes better because by virtue of being in their proximity. I may not even know them. I've been in one interaction I met years ago, but there's something about their spiritual aura, something about that vibe which they brought, which had an effect on me. And sometimes it just takes that one interaction for me to just want it more.
That's it.
And I find myself going to places and meeting people just to get that feeling again. The truth is, spirituality is the default position of anyone who loves truth. And even non-Muslims love truth. Everyone wants this thing. And you'll find it in all sorts of places. So do we have role models? Yes, we do. That person I went hiking with 3 years ago, I still remember the fun time we have. That traveler who I bumped into on the way to the passport office, I remember him fondly. That sister who had a problem and I gave her one piece of advice, I'll be thinking of that same advice that I gave for 5 years.
Beautiful.
These small bits of interaction, that case I had 3 years ago, I still think about now. That person I met last year, they're still in my mind. These thoughts and these meetings and interactions, they make an effect on us. And there are people like this all around the world. You know that old person who you never talk to in the Islamic Center? Go say hi to them.
Yeah.
You don't know what they've been through. They have so much advice for you. You know, and there are many examples like this. So we don't have a lack of role models. We have a lack of seekers of truth who are taking themselves seriously enough to cling on to these role models.
Yeah, definitely. No, I like the way you put that, because there's role models all around, right? There's examples. Every interaction is an interaction for you to learn and an opportunity for you to learn. So when you change your mindset and switch it to that point, what am I going to gain today, rather than what pain am I going to take today, that gain is more worthy what you're going to do. With going back to the discussion earlier, what we were talking about in terms of sort of thinking outside the box and changing our approaches, young people today are more exposed to more Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. So things like meditation, mindfulness, things like the betterment of the spirit, the soul, maybe doing things like yoga or these kind of practices, or being in the gym itself, is a way of actually increasing one's spirituality. Do you feel that, again, I'm going to go back to our kind of centers, our leaders, our community leaders, our ulama, could maybe encourage more discourse and put programs together around possibly Islamic meditation or Islamic mindfulness, and how important that is to increase your spirituality?
Definitely we need a discourse on these things, because when we have Islamic and non-Islamic theory, how they interact is not always clear. Sometimes, for example, some theories are simply not compatible with Islam.
Yeah.
And the spiritual path which we would want to take in Islam, it does not include certain practices by design. And if someone comes from the West or the East with a spiritual path which might work for them, if it contains in it something which is in direct violation of the Quran or the Hadith, it has no place in our path.
Yes.
I can interact and learn, but to actually do it is damaging. Now, some theories are very closely linked to Islam.
Yes.
Political theories, social theories, psychological theories. For that, we need specialists who are in both fields, medical theories, to link these things together.
Yes.
Professor Legenhausen, Gary Legenhausen is a good scholar. He has a theory called civilizational representatives. He believes that in Islam, we need people who are representatives of the tradition of Islam, who are also experts in the secular sciences, in order to know which theories correspond with the haqq, which ones go against them. So for example, a doctor who has studied medicine in the West, but knows Islamic medical ethics very well.
Yes.
So they know not only the fiqh of which practices are appropriate, but they know which kind of tibb ma'asum, which medicines in the traditions are firstly authentic, so many are not authentic.
Yes.
And secondly, are appropriate alongside replacing or not at all with Western medicine, which is itself a theory. Okay, we need people who are in psychology, who have studied these issues in depth,
Yes.
to know which theories of the mind are linked with theories in the mind in Islam.
Yeah.
We can't rely on ideas of the aql. Aql is a much wider and sometimes irrelevant issue to psychology.
Yes.
Aql is defined in a very specific, sacred way. It's not just about the mind. It's about that's part of your sense, which is inclined towards Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, I'm a non-specialist in psychology. It's not my field. So I'm going to refer to specialists to advise me on this. We need to, number one, seek specialists in both. What did Legas say? Civilizational representatives to guide me on selecting and deselecting different theories before I make it practice.
Yes.
Now, once the ulama have advised on these issues, then I can start saying, well, what role does my mosque play in making that an actual action in the mosque? Should we have programs in the mosque or not? The mosque itself is not the most important platform for these issues as well.
No.
Communities can organize very effectively and do these actions themselves. You don't need a mosque for that. Now, the expansive view of the mosque, yes, there's many things the mosque can do.
Yeah.
But not every Imam Bagha or Husayniyah or masjid is built for this.
Yes.
An actual dynamic mosque is one where a young person in trouble can go to see a scholar who's like a father to them, who can give them real advice in their life and make for them a support plan to get them back on their feet in any issue.
Yeah.
We don't have that in abundance, and we should have them more.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I think I mentioned more communities and community leaders sort of coming, looking at it from a lens of outside of Islam. I was outside of Islam for so long that you have like youth leaders within the communities and people that you could go to coming into the faith. I don't see that. I don't see that. I think there's something missing there. I think we're missing a trick. So we should have adults and leaders in our communities that specialize in youth work, youth care, maybe mentoring and helping our young people.
Yeah, we should. And the reason why we don't have them now is because no one ever had these conversations when they should have had them 2 or 3 generations ago. I mentioned parents don't know their kids is because they didn't know their kids are going through these issues in the first place.
Yeah.
Every issue for them can sometimes be your iman is weak because you're not praying.
Yeah.
Whereas the truth is these issues require a more specialist and technical approach. And youth workers, like you mentioned, are people who can pick up on little, idiosyncratic clues and cues about what that person's actually going through and diagnose it appropriately. The soul should be treated with more meticulous nature than the body. It has more potential for sickness and more subtlety for progress. So it takes a specialist to figure these things out. And we need youth work. We need guys who have grown up, guys and brothers and sisters who have grown up in this community to be able to want to give back to it. Some just don't want to give back. They've got what they needed and they're making money and they've got a family and friends and they are too tired at the end of the day of work to give back to their community. And that raises questions about the society we're in and why it's so hard to do this. Like I said from the beginning, you have to want it. You have to want to give back. You have to want to give help. You have to want to accept help. And unless we're willing, it's not going to be effective for us. So we need willingness first of all.
Yeah, definitely. I see this kind of society changed really in the early 2000s when there was a change in government with the actual funding for youth programs, youth work. I did youth work in what we would call youth centres back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Then it changed and you had to go for grants and funding and try and start your own projects. And again, that was really, really a struggle. And then you see this disparity because there was no youth centres for our youth to go at that particular time. So what happened is it formulated a lot of gangs and a lot of coming together, and then there was a lot of discourse on the streets, which then our youth are actually going through every single day. And you're right in saying, so right in saying that our parents alone of youth out there right now, I ask you a question, do you know what your child has to go through on a daily basis? When they're walking to school, when they're coming home from school, when they're just out on the street, maybe just having to go to the store? You know, do you know the challenges that they actually have to face? It's time that we wake up. Sayyidina, I'll ask you a question. As a young person yourself, where do you start?
So this goes back to our issue before about wherever you start, this path is there for you, right? Because people start off in drastically different places. Some are from very religious families, and sometimes they're the ones who are struggling the most spiritually, because their religion was fed to them in a very traditional and quota-based way, and not in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Then you have those who have nothing, and in the climb to the top, they find Allah and help them on that journey. The first thing is, where do you start? You accept and acknowledge wherever you start, wherever you start, this path is laid out for you.
Yes.
And Allah Azza wa Jal knows deeply about everyone's individual journey. He knows the length and breadth of each step you're going to take. He knows how hard it was to get over the first one, and how much you're looking forward to the third one, and what the second one's like in between. He knows all of them.
That sandwich filling, right?
Trusting God like this is so helpful for these issues. So where do you start? I really think it is seeking help with Allah Azza wa Jal, asking the tawasul of Ahlulbayt, opening up the book, and just beginning. And if you fell off, coming back. There's a poem of Iqbal. Can I mention it? Because I think it's the day that we remember him.
Yes.
It's been translated to English. Iqbal is, of course, a great poet from the Pakistani tradition who's praised in different cultures. He mentioned this. It's a poem to a young man. Okay, it's a poem. He says it's translated to English. Your sofas are from Europe, and your carpets from Iran. My eyes weep blood when I see the youth in such luxury and ease. What good is it if you possess the splendor of Chosroes' kingdom, if you don't possess the bravery of Ali or the contentment of Sulaiman? Don't look for this in the glitter of today's civilization. You will find the contentment in the peak of Iman. When an eagle's spirit awakens in the youth, it sees its destination in the heavens. Yani, that's where you belong, in the heavens. You don't belong here. So despair not, for despair brings about the decline of knowledge and soul. The hope of a believer is among the confidence of God. And my favorite line, which is the last line, he says, your dwelling is not on the dome of a royal palace. You are an eagle. Make your dwelling in the highest of the mountain.
SubhanAllah.
This mentality from Iqbal, I wish I could say it in Urdu where it's more beautiful. This mentality from Iqbal is a template for fleeing from materialism towards immaterialism, fleeing from any sin I've done in the past and looking for the pleasure of worship. And we'll find it in this path. And like I said, we have to open our eyes.
Yeah.